Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. We return to the country of Canada. It's another of our All Things Canada edition, and we welcome back to the show Jasmine Peardon, a university student in Montreal, in Montreal, Quebec, studying political science, who was part of the Yves for NDP Leadership campaign team and was part of drafting the extraordinary manifesto, Capitalism Can't Be Fixed, Onwards to a Socialist Future, and was part of the effort to get Bianca Mugyenyi to join the NDP leadership race, and still part of the efforts to overturn her being barred, I believe, from entering the race. And we are also joined by a new guest, Zach Ruiter. He's an indie journalist and filmmaker who's covered various topics like the far right in Canada, the protests against Israel's ongoing genocidal onslaught in Gaza, marginalized communities like the trans community and indigenous communities. And he was also a research coordinator for the documentary Atomic Reaction, which is about Canada's involvement in the Manhattan Project. Wow, that's a documentary I definitely got to check out. And he too was also part of the E for NDP leadership campaign team, as well as Bianca for NDP leader. We were hoping to be joined by Julius Arscott, member of the NDP Socialist Caucus, Socialist Action Canada, but he's not shown up yet, so hopefully we see him. But if not, these are my two guests for the hour. So first off, guys, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
And
Youri.
yes, thank you. And as always, before we start, a reminder to our audience to please share widely all of One Plus One's content, past and present episodes. Our playlists help us overcome the far right algorithms and the dominant monopoly Western corporate state media and pseudo-leftist websites have in the social media world by sharing our content. Share us across social media and email. And please donate if you can to One Plus One at our PayPal. And if people would like an alternative form of payment, contact me at yurismouter@gmail.com. And sometimes Facebook blocks my ability to share One Plus One. So again, please share it widely. It helps the show immensely, and it's our only way of overcoming colonial, pro-imperialist, sexist, heteronormative, racist medias. So now on to the topic at hand. So Jasmine, let me start. Let me start with you. As I said, from the get go, you were part of E for NDP leadership team, and sadly, the unelected three-person vetting committee of the NDP rejected him, and then you were part of you and basically all of Eve's campaign team said, okay, Plan B, let's have Bianca go. And then sadly, I think it was just a week ago that Bianca was rejected. So in general, your response to that, and I know, So in general, your response to that, I know you'll probably tell us about your frustration. Let's start with you, and then Zach. Yeah, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, so they rejected her because they called her a proxy for her husband. In reality, after Eve was blocked and it became very clear that they weren't going to let him in, we discussed as a group who was best to put forward. Our comms director requested a leadership package. Bianca requested a package. There was discussion about me even requesting a package, but I was just not in a place and it was too last minute. So Bianca thankfully stepped up and she did that for our movement and she made that clear that, she's a mother, so this isn't necessarily the thing that she planned to do this year. But we put so much work in. It's such an important cause that she was going to step up and do this. And the NDP turned around and said that number one reason was like the first reason listed was that they didn't like the email that she sent them like a week or so after she sent in her application. She said, like if you guys could respond to me quicker so we can get through this because the deadline is coming up, like I'd really appreciate that.
I think
They
it's a
said that
natural response. Yeah.
yeah, they said that that's like impolite and they didn't like the way that, she said that to them. And then second, that she's a proxy. So it's just complete petty, anti-democratic, bureaucratic, just a terrible response. I actually was really surprised because honestly, I was gearing up. Like I was like studying our manifesto, like getting ready to really for Bianca to have a full campaign. And like, Bianca is super competent, but she ran the last 7 months as campaign manager, so more so on the organizing side and everything. And so she was like, this is going to be all hands on deck when this campaign starts. So I was like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm like really ready to do all the press releases and everything and also being in school and stuff. So like when I heard on the call, like my jaw literally dropped. I was like, no way. Like I almost didn't expect the NDP to be that bad. Like I kind of thought they were gonna be above doing that. So yeah, super disappointed. I mean, yeah, we gave the NDP a second chance at redemption and they closed the door. So, yeah.
Zach, your response.
Um, you know, in activism, when you want to change things, sometimes just, you know, as a troll, people will say, well, why don't you get involved in the democratic process and change something? So here we are in the democratic process, and we find that democracy itself, the thing that's supposed to function, the thing that is supposed to be the sort of the basis of a social contract, is not functioning. And in place of it is whether you're polite or not, whether you're appropriate or not. Your behavior is the issue. Um, and in the case of Bianca, after her husband Yves was rejected based on his behavior, the argument that she was a proxy for him, even if we were to accept that argument that she was a proxy, there's no rule against that.
Yeah.
So the decision was completely arbitrary. And the problem is that when we accept the suspension of democracy for for some strategy to maintain democracy, we've compromised democracy from the outset. And it's all the people who are in this moment buying into this coercive idea that um, this will be fixed later. There's like a liberal proverb, now is not the time. The
Mm.
problem, though, and you'll hear this word a lot lately, is capitulation. The strategy of capitulation, as we've seen at every juncture in which a point happens in which a decision has to be made and we kick the can down the road, deteriorates and erodes actual democracy in favor of the control of the powerful. And there's a lot of people who are having great hope in Avi Lewis's campaign because of the social democratic talking points. And I really want to be there with them, but I can't. I can't because what Avi Lewis has done is instead of leveraging this pressure from the grassroots, he said, I will fix this after I win. So
Mm,
from the outset, the paradox is that the only chance we have to improving our democracy is accepting that it is undemocratic. And you'll find that the point for action, the strategy that's always sort of decided upon amongst the left, is to fall back, is to continually fall back. So he's signaled this at the outset before he's even got power. So if you actually want to transform the party, you use the leverage now and you make the process fair now. Now is always the best time. But for the Lewises and even the people supporting Lewis, for some reason the consensus is that it has to be later. And I've been hearing that for decades.
yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. In fact, that's a perfect segue to this question. Now, I've already asked this question to Jasmine regarding Yves, so I'll ask you this question, Zach, and then and I'll get Jasmine's response again. Is shocked, shocked like me, or at the shocked and dismayed at the hostility, the avalanche of smears, and sometimes no coverage regarding Yves' leadership bid, no praise or people at least discussing the policy platform and what you were all part of, advocating that this is what a socialist Canada should do, must do. And that, when it comes to anti-imperialism and like radical Palestinian justice advocacy, just surprised by the level of hostility from many well-known left-leaning media, supposedly indie left media, nonprofit left media, with regards to Canadian imperialism, which I think this campaign and the hostility towards both Yves and Bianca shows that it really is the biggest taboo in Canada, and the so-called left in Canada is absolutely strongly complicit in it. So, Zach, your response on on that, followed by Jasmine.
There's definitely a chill around it. Um, and I think that's evidenced by how ostracized Eve is and how the campaign has been ostracized. And the fact that Eve was arrested for because a virulent right-wing racist accused him of harassment. He spent 5 days in jail. The charges were dropped, but because he solicited emails against like his political imprisonment, he was a political prisoner, and he asked for people to send emails to say that, the state shouldn't be getting involved in Twitter disputes. Um, he was then found guilty of harassing a police officer because he asked people to email him to get him out of jail because he was jailed for these bogus charges. So when the left wing looks away, when Avi Lewis and the other NDP leadership candidates don't show solidarity for the fact that Eve is a political prisoner, it shows the degree to which they will look away when you become a political prisoner. And they're defaulting to fear. And we all know that when fascism, incrementally encroaches on us as it is every day, the more we look away for our own safety, the more we let this thing metastasize. And we haven't really been clear about it. And I think that the reason why Eve wasn't allowed in and why Bianca certainly wasn't allowed in was you cannot rule out the chance that they would have won because Avi Lewis is offering a 3% wealth tax on billionaires. And even Bianca's campaign that had a platform that was crowdsourced or done by 40 different activists called for the abolition of billionaires. And I think that the Canadian public is actually even to the left of the Yves and Bianca campaign on billionaires, because I'm sure there's a sizable portion that are ready for the guillotine. So,
Okay, interesting.
it's true. I mean, do you like going to No Frills and being told that like they're giving things away at these prices, like hazing people that they should be able to afford food? It's ridiculous. And the idea that the best we can hope for is a 3% wealth tax on billionaires means that we're only being offered a system where the billionaires remain in control. Um, so so the question along the lines of like, yeah, that's why this campaign has been iced. And that's why I think that people who have good intentions and are supporting other campaigns need to see what the function of solidarity is in this time and get behind it. So I don't think it's too late. But that's my answer. Yeah.
Jasmine, your response. I know, yeah, your response. Not just to Eve, being rejected, and a lot of the left media in Canada, supposedly, indie nonprofit media, just not even covering like like the campaign and giving Eve like a fair shot. So you would so yeah, so answer that, and then on top of the media blackout when it comes to Bianca's efforts trying to run, and now her being barred from running.
So I would say there was a strong media blackout with Yves, and the only time that they would talk about Yves was quite negatively to discredit the campaign. With Bianca, it's a little bit different. There has been some coverage. She has had people reach out a little bit. She also got like herself published in Rabble. Um, so there has been a little bit more, like definitely not from like mainstream, but a little bit more coverage of Bianca. Um, so I would say that that part is more promising, but still there's like a media blackout in the way that they framed her being disqualified or blocked. Like the Globe and Mail headline was Yves Engler's wife like blocked or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like it should have been like anti-democratic NDP party gatekeepers block Bianca Mugyenyi. Like the way that they're framing it is not it's not free press, it's not like democratic, it's not real. So they're framing our campaign in a very specific way that they're just not framing the other campaigns like that. And I think it's because we're the only campaign that's actually a threat. Because number one, we understand what's going on. Like we are not gonna funnel funds to Ukraine. We're not looking at this with like misty eyes thinking, well, oh, we can just reform capitalism a little bit. Like we have a clear understanding of what's going on and what needs to happen in order to change it. So there's no media coverage in that way. And because sometimes we do say like, oh, it's because of our like support for Palestine or it's because we're socialists. And then people will say back to us like, Tanille supports Palestine, like Tanille's anti-war, one of the other leadership candidates. But it's like, I'm sorry, but Tanille's not a threat. And she's not a threat because nobody knows who she is and she doesn't have like backing. Like Yves and Bianca have a lot of support. Bianca raised over 100K in like 10 days. She's, relatively unknown. Whereas Yves came into this with at least like a name. So when he raised like 100K, like, we were excited and happy, but I wasn't as surprised as with Bianca. So yeah, I mean if there was truly like a not manufactured press in Canada, the press would look so different just in our campaign. It would be Bianca Mugyenyi raises like 100K in 10 days. Who is this woman? What is this campaign? Like NDP is blocking people? What is vetting? Did you know that you can like have candidates vetted before you even get to see who could possibly represent you? Like, yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's just very illuminating.
isn't it also quite shocking? Like, it's a pity we don't have Barry or Julius here because I really, really want to talk about like what inspired you guys to pick, Yves to be NDP leadership candidates. But anywho, but they're not here. But what I wanted to say was, you mentioned the thing about like the money. I was amazed at how much money Yves was able to raise, because when you are running in this NDP leadership race, you have like it's a lot of money you have to pay to the party just to enter the race, if they allow you to enter the race and so forth. And Yves did all of that months before, which I thought was incredible. And when Bernie Sanders, did something like that in the U.S., even leftists who were a bit skeptical of the Sanders campaign, we were all unanimously like, "Dude, this is awesome! I think Bernie actually does have a chance of of winning this thing." There's now when it comes to Canada, that actually has like a third major party, which is supposed to be a social democratic party. It's Yves Engler is a grifter.
Yeah.
Like just that still is unbelievable, and that still gets under my skin. So much like the amount of like hostility, slander, and smearing that Yves uh, that Yves got. But then I have to ask this question then about Bianca. Let me pull it out. So when it comes to Bianca, again, there's been a strong, I think, left wing media blackout as well in Canada's, indie left media. Like like when Bianca was even trying to join, there was hardly, there was hardly any media coverage of Bianca's efforts to try to join the platform, and then the NDP, barring her, with the exception of Nora Loreto, and that was on Canadian Dimension. Now I haven't checked, Google in the last 2 days, but I did, check today. And when you type up, Bianca's name, in the campaign, because Bianca was putting out campaign videos on social medias, and I would check, Google searches every day about Bianca's campaign or just Bianca itself, and it was the shortest Google search of my life, of only just like 10, 16 pages maximum. And most of it was just recycled Globe and Mail and Canadian press articles about Yves Engler's wife trying to join the leadership race, and now Yves Engler's wife rejected from joining the NDP, leadership race. So again, I asked the question, and apologies if it's repetitive, but you guys are shocked by the often pro NDP and the NDP critical media. These are the people who complain all the time about the NDP not being left enough, not being undemocratic enough, not covering Bianca, and not really complaining much about her not being in the race. And yeah, and your response to that before I tell people about how impressive they should be on Bianca's, leftist CV.
So I deleted Twitter recently, and I only rejoined it because I had trouble publishing my documentary that I made on Eve. I made a documentary called Democracy Falls, Yves Engler and the
Brilliant
NDP.
documentary.
Thank you. It's and I'm not technically a part of the campaign because I do maintain my journalistic independence. And I think even in that documentary, I don't propagandize. I want to show things as they are and find the comedy in this kind of well-worn socialist caucus wanting to, take over the government of Canada. I find that charming and admirable. Um, but I know that Jasmine, you've engaged more so with like people online, and you've been very patient to do that, and you've encountered a lot of people who are defending the exclusion, and they're coming at you with a certain energy, and a lot of them, from what you told me, are Gen Z. And I was wondering if you could kind of like, as someone who wasn't engaging in that on the daily, tell me what it was a little bit like and where these people are coming from, what they're communicating, and what you really think is going on that leads to this amplification of the blackout online.
I think people think it's dangerous to be associated with Eve. I think they hear other people call him a grifter. They hear other people say that he's a Putin apologist or that he's like, all of these other kind of labels that get put on him.
Well,
Maybe they don't know.
there are even lefties who call him anti-Semitic, which is the most disgusting.
Yeah, I mean the anti-Semitism, yeah, anyways. Like it's just who isn't anti-Semitic these days, according to those people. But um yeah, I think that it's too risky for people to stand up is how they see it. Like especially people who maybe don't read Eve's work. Like somebody I was engaging with them on a Discord because I've kind of just taken on this role now of like public education. So I'm talking with a lot of people on different spaces. And on a Discord, like they put in this chat saying like, oh, Eve is pro-Assad. He supports authoritarian dictatorships. Here, this is the YouTube video in which he supports them. And it's the same one that the NDP used in their rebuttal of Eve.
Hmm.
In that video, Eve literally, it's an interview, first of all, that Eve is conducting the interview. And Eve actually stops the person he's interviewing and says, "Whoa, well, some people would take problem with you, saying these things about Assad." And he talks in the thing saying like, I don't think he calls Assad a dic I think he calls like father-son dictatorship or something like that in there.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, you're citing something that you didn't even watch. Like, and then another time I'm engaging with somebody about Rwanda, and they're saying, oh, Eve is a genocide denier, and so I'm going back and forth with them, and I'm like, what's the guy's name in Rwanda? I'm forgetting.
Paul Kagame, the
Kagame. Yeah, and I'm like,
Western-backed dictator of Rwanda.
yeah, and I'm like, yeah, but they're like, why does it? Because I'm saying like he's not genocide denying. He's just saying that these numbers are suspect, and this is like backed up in academic literature. And they're like, but what does it do to say that these numbers are suspect? And I'm like, well, they support the Kagame regime right now. And I'm like, and so I'm saying, and they're like, don't even talk to me about the Kagame regime. They're like, that has nothing to do with it. I don't want to hear anything about Kagame. And I'm like, okay, well, then you don't want the facts. Like, you don't actually want to know. So I think some people are really swept up in the narrative. They don't want to be seen being a part of this narrative because they're not strong within themselves to defend it because they don't know the facts. And it is hard to be on the defense. I mean, leftists are always on the defense, and you have to know your stuff because you get fought on it all the time. So I think there's that. But then if we're talking about like the broader media landscape, um, I'm not going to call the breach like compromised, but I mean, it's biased, it's like heavily biased towards Avi Lewis. I mean, the editor is the political advisor on Avi's campaign, and they explicitly spread lies about our campaign. Same with Nora Loretto. I mean, she spread a lie about our campaign, about campaign financing. So I don't know. Like it's like talking to a brick wall. They
And
don't
also,
want to know the facts.
and also, even when she was defending, like on a Facebook post, even when she was, defending Bianca being barred and shared her article, and it was a good article, defending Bianca and so forth. But she still, like when she's introducing her article, felt the need to kind of like throw shade at Eve, which bothered
Yeah.
me.
Can I put something in here? I think that from what I've heard, I think that Avi is someone who is more interested in power than he is in the change that he espouses. And from anecdotes that I can't repeat, he demands like full fealty and full loyalty. And I know that they're employing a lot of people. They've raised almost $1 million because of his name recognition and access to the lists. So I'll point out that even that the 100,000 that Bianca raised and the 100,000 Eve raised was independent of being recognized as official candidate. But that
Exactly.
there's this idea that if you like, I have this idea called hold your own, that instead of becoming, I'm team orange and I'm going to fight team red and team blue, that you actually hold your own representatives accountable because they're the only ones who are claiming to be accountable to you, the membership and the movements. And I don't think there's any accountability from Avi. And I think that anyone who wants to hold Avi accountable is afraid that they will get iced out of, the future NDP. And really what you see is this continuation of this kind of like NGO industrial complex that's
Mm-hmm.
chomping at the bit to become the new party bureaucracy because they are the current bureaucracy in labor and civil society. And their function, as they've sort of like spearheaded the movement, has been as these double agents that raise awareness of, but enforce the problem at the same time because they are funding driven. And that's the decision people have to make between paying off their student loan and, being able to afford a mortgage versus being ostracized and not being able to work in the field that they want. So part of the chill that comes from this, and maybe for the young people around this, is that they don't want to be on the outside. And when we see Eve being arrested and on bogus charges, and there's silence against that, I think, I think, I think Jasmine is very right. This campaign was the real threat, and it could win. And the real threat, the real person and the real campaign that is actually challenging power is being criminalized. And if it's not being criminalized, it's either ineffective or it's compromised.
Yeah. In fact, that's a perfect segue to what I wanted to say about Bianca, and wait, actually, wait, one moment. Yeah, Bianca. If you look at like her background, it's a pretty incredible background. I mean, Bianca was part of the Leap Manifesto, and not a tiny role at all, like a major role in the Manifesto. And when she was director of the CFPI, the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, she still is very much involved there. But when she was the director, she was central to making sure Canada didn't get a seat at the UN Security Council, which was a major first campaign for the CFPI. And apart from so many wonderful educational web events that the CFPI has done with her moderating, she and the team got the Green Party of Canada during a leadership race. They got all of the candidates to come on to discuss foreign policy, and it was epic. And I think it was Dimitri Lascaris at his best. And then, when it comes to, educating Canada's largely reactionary role in the world, when it comes to the efforts to free Meng Wanzhou, and also it was the CFPI was frontline there under Bianca when she was a director, and it was also the CFPI that largely did a huge web event of solidarity to Sarah Jama when the Ontario NDP and the NDP at large kicked her out of the party when she spoke outrightly against Israel, forcing her to be an independent. It was largely Bianca and the team getting that together, and also the book that Bianca co-wrote and co-authored with Yves, Stop Signs, Cars, Capitalism on the Road to Economic, Social, and Ecological Decay. It is such an excellent tour de force of a book. It's the kind of like when you read it, it's kind of like when you watch like an epic documentary like Food Inc., Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, Super Size Me, or True to the Powerless. It's a great book on the automobile industry, and it's also arguably one of the most underrated and overlooked books of Yves. And he did that book with Bianca. And I don't know too much about Bianca's time as a student activist and a feminist, but what I'm trying to say is she's an incredible leftist and an eco-socialist, all of that stuff. And the silence in defense of her, to quote Bob Dylan, the silence is too deafening, it's just astounding. Like the lack of just solidarity she's gotten from a lot of these big left organizations, these Canadian left media outlets, and even the other candidates. Jasmine, your response followed by Zach.
Yeah, I mean, Bianca is very understated. She's integral to our campaign. She's really inspiring, one-on-one. Like, I think she doesn't feel super confident sometimes, but she knows a lot. Like, we had her in the policy committee, and like, she was the one who put forward all the categories of policy and organized everyone. And she's been in every single committee, like, leading it all. One time I was doing some Indigenous consultation with her, and they said something that reminded her, and she was like, "Oh yeah, on my work with research for the front lines." I guess she's like a board member for research for the front lines, And I didn't know what it was, so I looked it up, and they do essentially, if you're like at the environmental front line, if you're an indigenous community or like a small community and you need research done in order to like fight in court or something like that, you need to like, you know, have a scientist come and like take a sample or something like that. Or any type of research. This group is just volunteer researchers, scientists who volunteer their time for sometimes urgent, sometimes longer projects, and they completely give away their data, which in academia, it's all about getting published. You know, like you don't give away your data and not take credit for it. But the whole thing about Research for the Front Lines is no, we're doing this for you and we're doing it anonymously and we're giving it to you and we're donating our time. And like that's the type of organizations that Bianca is a board member of. So I mean, like, how much better of a person could you want to lead a party? Like, really? And she has like an an interesting history coming from Africa. She has a story
Uganda,
about
yeah.
her, yeah, about her dad getting I don't know, like prosecuted or
Yeah,
targeted.
yeah, they had to flee when the Western-backed Idi Amin government came into power.
Yeah, so she came here, fleeing political violence. Um, like she knows the struggles of Canadians in many different dimensions. She's quite intimately connected to them. She's exactly who you would want as a leader. So to say that she's a proxy, like I said in the press release, I'm like, if she's a proxy for anything, she's a proxy for socialism. This is what leadership should be. Like, we don't want somebody who is obsessed with themselves and leading only for their own benefit. Like, just we have a really backwards understanding of leadership. I mean, if you actually said to somebody like in China, for example, where they have is called like full process democracy, where it's all about like, can you prove what you've done from village level up, just to prove that you are capable of being a
Yeah,
politician and that you can like step forward and like, I mean, like our campaign's the only one that's actually had somebody nominated. Like, I just can't. It's so backwards.
Zach, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll say that when I'm talking to Bianca or I'm, watching her on a webinar, things resonate, and they resonate in a way that um, make me feel connected and make me see a pathway to the repair that we need in the world. And I see that from a very collective, but also very selfish way. Like I have asthma. I'm a triathlete. I like to run outside, bike outside. And when there's smoke from forest fires, I can't do those things.
Mhm.
So when I'm looking at politics, I'm really looking at like, is anyone offering a collective path to where I can actualize myself into my old age? And amongst mainstream and even left-wing media, what I learned from my time as a climate reporter is that climate is being underreported. The threat is being really underreported. It's actually more serious than we think it is because the possibility is there. You know, when you hear 3 degrees by mid-century, climate change is not linear. It amplifies and it's exponential. So things don't just stabilize at 3 degrees. There's tipping points, there's feedback loops, there's planetary boundaries. So everything that you hear normally from other politicians or, other media sources, the best that's on offer sometimes is just recognition of the problem or these sort of tepid, capitulating solutions. And to me, I call it disempowering gruel. Like we
Yeah,
talked about Tanille talking about Palestine, Heather McPherson talking about Palestine, even Avi talking about Palestine. It's how these people make you feel when you're listening to them. And I know some people maybe get their backs up when they hear what Bianca is saying, but she is the real deal. And I think I I think that when you listen to Avi, you know that what you're being offered is better than pro-pipeline McPherson. It's it's
Yeah.
not inspiring. It's not, and like, he was at a debate and they were talking about what's your favorite emoji? And Tanille said, I like the eggplant. And then Avi was like, for me, my most used emoji is the fist. And like crickets in the room. Because we know that this guy is a limousine lefty. We know this guy is a champagne socialist. We know this guy is a Nepo baby. And for some reason, we think that's the best that we can do. I no, I don't think Avi or any of the candidates have really had to face any scrutiny from the left-wing media. There hasn't been a left-wing interview of Avi that said, how are you going to make these things happen? How are you going to confront the contradictions in your platform? Do you think an opening argument in a negotiation is to tax billionaires at 3%? These people have like evaded any accountability from the left wing. So in terms of Bianca, what's interested in me is that like Bianca is like the signal through the noise. And what I keep on coming back to in terms of this idea of Canada being a Gothic country, that we have everything bright and cheery on the surface, but underneath there's a lot of things underneath, just right underneath the surface that are really horrific.
Mhm.
Um, when it comes to that, when it comes to like Canada being like that, I think that people either are afraid of their freedom or they don't want the responsibility of their freedom.
Mm.
And I want to convince them that, I believe in multiple ways, but democracy and elections are a political terrain that we shouldn't just excuse and we shouldn't just accept, but that we should fight. And I think that people don't want to actually push it. Whereas Bianca recognizes that with the, approved candidates, all of them are unwilling to cross a certain line. But the political moment calls for crossing that line. And crossing that line makes you a threat. And the only way we're going to do that is if we're in solidarity. So to all the people who are, really encouraged by Avi Lewis, I'd say I would like to be encouraged by Avi Lewis. I'm not a spoil sport, but my condition for being encouraged by Avi Lewis was the litmus test and the way he responded to the exclusion of Yves Engler. And he's so far been silent on the exclusion of Bianca. And Bianca was a co-founder of The Leap and the executive director of The Leap.
Like I said, she wasn't just like a small like background player on the lead. She was like major, yeah, major position. But then that's I don't know if you both want to respond to this question, which is the avalanche of left critics of Eve who said you should have just given your vetting papers like a couple of months before. You gave your vetting papers too late, so therefore you can't complain if you're if the NDP excludes you from these debates and so forth. So I don't know if you guys want to respond to that or just respond to the fact that with Bianca's exclusion, do you think Bianca's exclusion really does prove the point and vindicate the argument that some of us anti-imperialist leftists have to say, which is that in Canada, the biggest taboo is Canadian imperialism. You cannot criticize Canadian. You cannot criticize Canadian imperialism. So, and the fact that Eve got, rejected. All of it because of his foreign policy positions and him being on the right side of every issue. Do you think the fact that Bianca got rejected is because of anti-imperialism? That is the last, that's the last taboo in Canadian politics. Jasmine, your response followed by Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was, maybe not entirely convinced. Like, I definitely thought with Eve, I definitely thought that part of it was our policy. Like, I knew that a lot of people disagreed with us and thought that what we said was unacceptable. But I had also heard some personal anecdotes. Like, for example, when um, why am I forgetting her name right now? The Alberta leader, Heather McPherson.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm tired today. When
no problem.
Heather McPherson was at the meet and greet in Montreal, somebody on our campaign went up to her and asked her, "So what do you think about Yves running or like not being allowed in here?" Something about Yves. And Heather didn't respond, but then her like aide or assistant or somebody said like, how is Heather going to be in the same room as Yves? Like, have you not seen what like they've what Yves has written about her? And all of the NDP, I've heard this from multiple people. They're saying, how would we be in the same room as Yves? Have you seen what he's written about us? So there is this personal aspect to Yves where I think a lot of people feel personally attacked by his journalism over the years because they've held him to account in very uncomfortable ways. But with Bianca, we obviously don't have that. So that's why I think I was so shocked when she was blocked because I was like, wow, it actually is our policies. Like, there's actually no democracy if you want to change things. And I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow, you know? Like it's then, I had a moment where I'm like, what jobs am I gonna have? What if like I'm doing research with university right now and it's controversial research and I'm like, I'm like thinking about that a little bit because I'm like, this isn't just in politics, this is in the workplace, this is in university as well. Like this is actually real. And this is my first kind of true introduction to seeing how this all works. And it blocks and it stops and it ruins careers, it ruins reputations, it ruins people's lives. But actually, I feel a lot more motivated. I think I just had a moment where I was like, okay, wow, the world really is that way.
Zach, anything you want to add to that, or?
I'll just echo that that all of the criticisms of Eve were so disingenuous because even if they were valid, they weren't grounds for expulsion. Whereas they weren't grounds for, us like, uh, sacrificing democratic integrity. The whole idea is like, if you don't like Eves, don't vote for him. That's democracy. And then when Bianca ran, and they came up with nothing, it denuded that any of those arguments about, fundraising incorrectly were really focusing on, really subjective, arbitrary reasons to actually reject the platform. And the platform actually wants to confront power and make life livable. And 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 you mentioned McCarthyism at the start. Like, there's huge repression going on. Um, and in terms of Palestine, there's a live stream genocide going on, and Canada is completely complicit. The way that, Carney's Minister of AI, Evan Sullivan, is cooperating with Israel,
Oh
and
wow,
Israel is using AI to target and kill Palestinian journalists, their whole families. And this is the government that the NDP most recently um, did not unanimously try and take down. Um, so it's this built-in complicity, and this is coming back to this Canadian Gothic, where it's horrific under the surface, but it's so clean
Yeah.
on the surface where you've washed your hands because you wear a keffiyeh and you say that the genocide should stop, but it seems like in the political spectrum, the only allowable opposition to genocide is rhetoric. The minute that um, you want to coherently and consistently um, pull the thread in which Canadian culture and the Canadian left is complicit and inactive on it, you will be ostracized, and in the case of Yves, criminalized. And in the case of many protesters who've been criminalized all over the country for peaceful protest, if they've actually targeted the weak points. And I think that Avi Lewis early on in the campaign said that it was going too far to have an MP's office plastered with protesting genocide. Like, I don't know if there was posters put up on the MP's window, but for Avi Lewis, that was too far. So we really have to tease out this capacity and this difference between saying the right thing and actually following up on the right thing. And we have to stop like begging for scraps that the best we can hope for is speaking truth to power, as if that has not been like failing us for decades. But there seems to be this sunk cost fallacy, this like emotional connection to if we just kind of like say it in the right way and change people's hearts and minds, things will change because we're doing it in the right way. And it seems to me like this now that the NDP is decimated and they're wanting to revive themselves, they're like, okay, just one more roll of the dice with this social democratic capitulation, and this will work. And from the outset, it's not going to work without us. It's not going to work without by ostracizing the activists that actually want to stop the genocide and actually want to pull the threads of where we're all complicit. If you're cutting them out and ostracizing them, you're not going to go anywhere. And if you even look the way they idolize AOC and the way they idolize Bernie, have we not seen that even if they are well intentioned, that they're not working on a time frame that is acceptable to the current crises that we face, but rather they're actually kind of holding the door at the leftmost edge of the inside to police and gatekeep the left in terms of saying this far and no further. And that point is speaking out against something, calling it for what it is, but in effect, leaving it completely unchallenged.
Yeah, no, it's quite unbelievable, and I sort of echo what you were saying, Jasmine. That's okay. You don't like Yves because he's too aggressive when confronting politicians who support a genocide. Wow, I thought that was the moment to have a Malcolm X tone of voice, but okay, some people really do have a problem with that. And okay, so Yves is too confrontational. He insulted this friend of mine. He insulted that friend of mine. Okay, that you don't want him in the race because his tone is too aggressive. I just still think that's a stupid reason, but okay, whatever. Bianca, though, and I often say this as an insult, but I say this as a compliment to her. Bianca is very Gandhian. Like Bianca is very Gandhian. Yeah, evil, confronts you head on, and just like Dimitri Lascaris, when they're angry, they are very angry. And Bianca, will approach you in a different way. But her politics, but that doesn't mean that her politics are any less radical. Like her politics are perfect. Both her and Eve's politics are perfect, and yet you know, again, all of the people who are such stickler for the rules and so forth. Uh, 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 I mean, Bianca being rejected really does show that you cannot speak out on Canadian imperialism. You cannot speak out on how false Canadian peacekeeping is. And yeah, you can, you can stand up for Palestine, and you can stand for, and you can stand up for Haiti, but being against NATO, being against the war in Ukraine, wanting it to de-escalate, and even pushing back against the pivot to Asia, like this race has really proven that Canadian imperialism is the biggest taboo. And yeah, again, both of your responses, Jasmine and then Zach.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And like I want to pick up, I guess, on what Zach was saying about like Avi and just kind of maybe explain why it's so bad. So like the thing with Avi is that he really makes you feel good supporting him. Like when he speaks to you, like the fist in the air anecdote that you did, where he's, which is your best emoji, you're like, oh, he stands with me. And when he talks to you, like he wants to inspire you and he wants to really bring you in. And you can feel like when he talks, like, I'm like, wow, he's like a very persuasive talker, like I feel brought into this. But like it's the same with Zohran Mamdani in the States. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the same with Obama and it's the same with Trudeau. And it's a very dangerous territory because what they like bring in under this nice facade is either more of the same or worse, yet you feel like you did your job because you voted in the most liberal option or the most left option, and you went around and you knocked on doors and you campaigned and you volunteered for the first time in your life and you got involved in politics that everybody told you to do. So then when they're in there, then you step back and you stop watching the headlines, you stop reading, you stop volunteering and all of that. But you just ushered in something that is somebody who is going to do no change at all and keep the status quo and potentially make it worse. And I mean, people warned about Mamdani. Um, like after he won the primary, everybody was really excited. And then there was just one thing after another with him where he was walking back on Palestine, where he, said he was going to keep Jessica Tisch. He's very anti-ICE but pro-police. The NYPD just almost killed, I think it was like a 17-year-old the other day. And in his remarks, he literally congratulated the police. Like,
Well,
and
and he even apologized for saying that the police are institutionally racist. And if you cannot say that about the police, just the NYPD alone has a terrible track record.
yeah, like yeah,
Uh,
so and I mean, I think like, I'm not sure if Avi's gonna win, but he definitely has a lot of support, but maybe not like bureaucratic support that Heather has. But I think Avi, has the potential to kind of sweep up the NDPers and make them feel really good about electing him if they do it. And I almost think that could be more dangerous for the left because then people are going to step back, they're going to stop being involved, and then Avi is not going to challenge power because he has consistently shown that he's very like afraid to challenge power even when there's nothing on the line. He didn't speak out on the budget. Like when the budget came out and it was so austere, full of austerity, and it was pro-military, he actually scheduled a webinar for like a week and a half away after the budget vote. And he didn't say a single thing until the NDPers came up with what they did on the budget vote, which was they split it, where some abstained and some voted against in order to like save face. And then he said, "Yep, if I was the head of the NDP, that I would have voted against it right along with Heather." And it's just like, you're so weak. Come on. Like,
Well,
who are you going to
here's
stand up for? You didn't stand up for Sarah Jama when she got kicked out of the ONDP because they got approached to be on the open letter for it. He got approached to be on the webinar. He said no. He didn't stand up for our campaign. He didn't stand up for Bianca, who he literally called and told her at the beginning of their campaign, Bianca, I love you. This is politics. We're going to be good no matter what. He hasn't even spoke out for her. So you think that he's going to challenge power for you? Like, get real. Like,
Can I jump in here?
go ahead.
This goes back further. In my career as an environmental journalist at Now Magazine, I always followed the work of Cory Morningstar, who ran a blog called Wrong
Yes,
Kind
yes,
of
yes.
Green.
I know her. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think even when I was at Now Magazine, I still kind of felt like, oh boy, everything is a conspiracy to this woman. But she really ha was more aligned with this kind of like anti-civilization, almost like neo-Luddite kind of like big picture that a lot of people aren't willing to see in terms of like how nature is just commodified, how movements are financialized. And
Yes,
she was a thorn.
she was the beginning of that new breed of NGO critics that were
Of NGO critics,
yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
and I saw how fierce it was and how silenced you would be if you talked about it. But there was women of color against imperialism who had insight, who wrote a book called The Revolution Won't Be Funded. There was actually Drew Oja J and McDonald Stainsby who wrote Offsetting Resistance, and they tracked how as the movement of the against the tar sands grew, the decision makers became concentrated in very few and more closely connected to the actual oil companies that were funding the people who were speaking against the movement.
Mm,
And so in Corey's work on criticizing Naomi Klein and criticizing Avi Lewis, she brought to the surface that Avi Lewis's executive producer for This Changes Everything was Susan Rockefeller, which is the Rockefellers, which is of the family that inherited the most and actually controls the Rockefeller Trust. This was the executive producer of Avi Lewis and Naomi Klein's groundbreaking This Changes Everything documentary. And at the same time as the This Changes Everything documentary had a lot of momentum, they were bringing people out on a Sunday in New York City or in Toronto with a jobs climate justice march. And basically, these were like what No Kings are right now. These were billionaire funded spectacles that allow people to have an outlet for their anger, beautiful signs, great artwork, families, kids who want to not die in a climate fire.
Yeah,
But at the end of the protest, they say, thank you, and now disperse, post on your social media. And the Klein and Lewises then harvest that to sort of speak for it within the system. So at the same time as actual frontline land defense was going on, which they claimed to support and they called Blockadia. They never were part of mobilizing these people that they could mobilize as, you know, part of probably the top five environmentalists in North America, Turtle Island. They never mobilized people. They always disempower people. And from what I could tell, is that they're billionaire friendly. They're billionaire friendly. So when you work with Susan Rockefeller instead of Eve, you're working with the richest family in America that made their money on imperial or standard oil and are famous for saying you clean up well and you make your most money when blood is running in the streets. This is compatible leftism. And most recently, when Naomi Klein was on Democracy Now!, and she was talking about how bad a campaign Kamala Harris was running because she was allying with the Cheneys and trying to attract Republican voters to
yeah.
the Democrats. And while she was funding a genocide and saying that nothing would fundamentally change under her presidency than Biden's presidency, Naomi Klein tells tells Amy Goodman at Democracy Now, Kamala is running a terrible campaign. She's ostracizing all the people on the left. She's not listening to us. But at the same time, Trump is going to round us up. So we have to be smart. And so I think when it comes down to this fulcrum, or you might have heard it as like, like a rupture, Klein and Lewis always steer people back into empire. So when Jill Stein and Butch Ware campaigned as a third party, and they said genocide is a red line. And when the uncommitted movement tried to warn them that you won't win without us, we're uncommitted until you actually say we'll stop genocide. These people don't want power, they want a broker power. Because if they wanted power, they would stop genocide, and that's wildly popular. But they don't. They serve the interests of power. They serve the interests of capital. And and the problem with the lesser evil and always choosing the lesser evil is what Brianna Joy Gray calls the ratchet effect. That's how we just ratchet so far right. And that's why we have an NDP that is really pro-pipeline in BC, the way they are cooperating with MAGA to do the Sealisms and Rupert natural gas pipeline, the way they the NDP government brutalized the Wet'suwet'en land defenders, the way the NDP in Manitoba wants new corridors to Churchill to do new pipelines. The NDP is the new
And that's
Democratic
and
pipeline party.
that's Wob Canoe. And like Wob Canoe, like Avi Lewis, he has this kind of like CBC leftish sort of like like brand like associated to him. I remember like I have like a copy of like his docu series about the plight of Indigenous Canadians. And like at this moment when you have people who are calling for defunding the police, and we need to expand our healthcare to include mental health care and so forth. Like, yeah, like he's only subsidizing just like for-profit places in which if you got the money, you'll get your mental health covered, and it's flooding the police, like the police in like Manitoba, and like that just yeah, that's
And
just shocking.
defund is a bit more of a sanitized ask than abolish.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we don't even know where Avi Lewis and the main NDP candidates stand on the question of defund police. And from what I can see, with those goons that are the community response group from the RCMP that actually work directly for the pipeline proponent, is that like, can we still expect for frontline land defenders to be violently arrested under an NDP federal government as they have been under a BC provincial government? And I think the answer is like, probably.
It's no, it's crazy. In fact, before I get to my last question, I did want to put this in there. About Avi Lewis. Two things about Avi Lewis, which anyways, there's so on the one hand, Avi Lewis, his granddad was David Lewis, who was leader of the federal NDP. And during that time, his father, Stephen Lewis, was leader of the Ontario NDP. And they were both notorious for kicking out the waffle. And they were they were just like notorious for always kneecapping unions when they wanted to strike and so forth, and when they wanted more collective bargaining and stuff like that. And I'm not even going to talk about their foreign policy. They were both like like pro-imperialist, both like very Zionist. So that's what I find interesting about Avi Lewis, because he really positions himself as to the left of the NDP, as the anti-NDP left wing insurgent. So when he was when the Leap Manifesto was unleashed and it became an organization and they were really trying to pressure they say they were trying to pressure like all parties, but they were really wanting to influence the NDP. It was Rachel Notley of Alberta and like the Alberta like NDP, which was hostile towards like the Leap, and like I don't even think they didn't want it to even come to like the floor of the convention to be to be debated on. Thomas Mulcair himself was also like very hostile towards like the Leap, towards the Leap Manifesto, and I
And
believe he also.
to clarify, the LEAP manifesto was a program to phase out fossil fuels and to uh, provide a just transition so that there wouldn't be any economic disadvantage to the people who are currently working in fossil fuels.
Yeah, and
So
it was and it
it,
was it was like the Canadian Green New Deal of what like Jill Stein was running on, and so you think about that, and you think about how like the NDP treated Avi, Naomi Klein, Bianca, and like that group of like eco socialists, and then you think of how like Avi Lewis has twice tried to run an election where the NDP establishment clearly thought he was too left for them and so forth. And that's why I just find myself just like quite baffled. Now, to his credit, he did later on speak out against like the vetting system and says like Eve has the right to run, but that was it. But that was it. But again, I just find it so shocking that here, the name Lewis amongst like the far left and the radical left of the NDP in Canada is a terrible name. Is a terrible brand name. You position yourself all these years ago as like this eco-socialist, and on just something as basic as like allowing people to like run in the NDP and like this stupid like three-person vetting committee, like you don't stick your neck out more. He should be sticking his neck out more for that. He's already like the kind of Mamdani like Bernie Sanders like in the race that the NDP allowed him to. So that shocks. So that just baffles me. But at the same time, I do remember, like you, Zach. I was very much interested in the work of Cory Morningstar, and I remember watching documentaries like Cowspiracy and reading about how the way we consume meat, the way we consume our food in general, is even more destructive to the climate than all the fossil fuels we do, and that's just talking the cars and so forth. And many people were complaining that Naomi Klein didn't address that in her book. This changes everything, and in the documentary, no mention of that at all. There's also no mention about militarism and so forth like that. And every time there was protesters, peaceful protesters. So again, with that tone policing, peaceful protesters like say and like asking them like, why don't you speak out more against the meat industry and so forth? Like Naomi and like Avi just like either wouldn't respond. It was like, can we just get like security here? Okay, you guys are out. Back to the Q&A. And so I'm curious, both of yours. Yeah, I'm curious your response to that. But before I get to my last question,
No, I mean, thank you for sharing. I wasn't aware of that. That's all I have to say.
Zach.
um, I'll say Cory Morningstar actually got her start in the NDP and Council of Canadians and attending COP and Cochabamba, and she saw the way things were working, and she was like, I can't be a party to the financialization of nature. And another shout out should be Jessa McLean of the Blueprints of Disruption podcast, who um, basically her whole podcast is about the co-optation of the left and trying to link movements in the left, but also her experience in the NDP that What's going on with Eve is not new. It's that anyone who's had a vision and who's had, heart and has had optimism has come into the NDP and been spit up and chewed out a lot of the times through vetting, a lot of the times through wanting to actually see movement on Palestine. Um,
I mean, even somebody like even somebody like Linda McQuaig. I don't agree with her historical assessment of Lester Pearson. That's another topic for another day. But even somebody like Linda McQuaig, who has for years documented how the rich in Canada pay very little, and it's the working class and the very precarious small middle class that's foots the bill. Even somebody like that, when she ran I forgot what was the writing, but it was somewhere in Toronto, and her opponent was Chrystia Freeland, and
mhm.
I think because of some comments she made about Palestine, nothing uncontroversial. Thomas Mulcair just went on like on the stupid hissy fit, and then she lost to
So
Chrystia Freeland.
there's something that we're missing in the conversation, and we're missing that the right wing is eating the lunch of the left wing because the left wing is sort of like exclusively tailored its offerings to the professional managerial class, the sort of like the NGO creative class, and has really jettisoned any, and so is the labor movement to a certain degree by representing only sort of the most privileged of unionized workers and not the ununionized workers. That the people who are voting the right wing and who are empowered by a Polyev or were empowered by Rob Ford at the time are actually the people that the NDP should be speaking to, the people who are struggling to make ends meet, the people who are so far from the elite, but they're given this false empowerment. And the reason
Actually, no, finish what
well,
you're going to say.
and the reason being is this rightward drift and professionalization of this party, which has become anti-democratic, so much so that it's been sort of controlled by the people who are kind of the inner ring of Jack Layton at the start. And these people have been moonlighting at corporate consultancies, where the consultancies are also run by the leaders of the liberals and the leaders of the conservatives. And that's why we almost have a uniparty in Canada, but it's only the right wing that's actually been able to leverage and mobilize people's resentment and their frustration with the increased costs of living and the inequity in our society. And that's a false empowerment, but it's nonetheless has been successful. So I think that had Yves or Bianca actually been allowed in, the media would have scandalized it. It would have attracted so many people to the party, and the party learned their lesson when Anjali Appadurai in BC registered 20 days before the deadline to run for the leadership of the NDP, and they allowed her to run. But once they realized that she was going to win because of how popular her eco-socialist platform was, they found an arbitrary reason to exclude her. So that's what they did with Bianca, is they learned their lesson from Appadurai. But for some reason, the left didn't learn the lesson that when an unjust decision happens, you don't accept it and fall back, you fight it.
Then again, then what's crazy, and I keep going back to this because it just really gets under my skin, is the people who are hostile towards Yves and Bianca are all the people you would think would at least just be supportive of them in the race and so forth. That you want to support Avi Lewis, okay, whatever, you've known him for 15 years or something like that. Like, okay, I can sort of get I can sort of get that, and because of like the leap in his association with his wife, Naomi Klein. Okay, I can sort of get that. What I cannot forgive though, and what still continuously gets me so pissed off, is just all the attacks on Eve, the smearing, and people literally and people who normally always bitch, complain, piss, whine, and moan
I'm
about the NDP being
I'm
undemocratic,
I'm
all of
just
a
gonna
sudden are
I'm
stickler
just gonna
for the rules, vetting.
I'm
You
I'm
should
gonna come
stuff
I'm
like
gonna come out and say something. I'm gonna come out and say something. I think that Yves is different. I think that he's a reluctant candidate. He was approached by the Socialist Caucus to run. I'm even gonna say that like from the outside, it seems like Yves is divergent and he's being bullied. He clearly has a fascination with foreign policy. He's an intellectual. He's somewhat awkward. But if like from
Oh
what I've
no, no,
talked about
I'm awkward.
Jasmine,
Eve is
so
actually fine.
the thing about Eve is, so I was when he comes into Toronto, he takes a ride share. He doesn't take the bus. He doesn't take the train. He certainly doesn't fly. He takes a ride share because of the savings and money. Jasmine told me on the phone that he was late for his talk in Halifax because he was waiting for the bus and he refused to take an Uber. Bianca told me that he refuses to wear a suit and he might have social anxiety. So I think that the left is bullying this guy, and I think that for as much as we've talked about inclusion and anti-bullying, the way that people have criticized Eve for being different, for being divergent in the ways that he's divergent, is very sandbox. It's very like lessons that we want to teach kindergarteners about inclusion. You see grown adults who ostensibly represent a movement against oppression and for solidarity, excluding this guy because he's not a typical politician. But the problem with neurotypical politicians is they're the ones who have gotten us into this mess. So we have this opportunity in front of us with the campaign of Yves and Bianca that can actually lead to stabilizing the climate, taking the heat off of the housing market by, seizing the real estate investment trusts, by massively taking away the $100 billion that Carney wants to put into the military.
Yeah.
And we can turn things around and we can have the life that we want. But I think these people have been put down, these good people who have been working in these NGOs for decades and who have daily compromised themselves. It's like or who have accepted diversity as long as it's pro-genocidal, and then as soon as the diversity of Sarah Jama, who is a woman of color in a wheelchair, opposes genocide, she's cut. It just shows how we are still in these kind of like uh these vestigial fear responses and not seeing it clearly for what it is. And I really salute all the people who have actually been emboldened and come together around the Eve campaign. And it's not going away. And I think it's happening in countries all over the world. It's trying to break out. It's trying to say that every day we are inundated with this idea that billionaires are going to kill you. That's the message of ICE. That's the message of Elon Musk. It's the message of,
Oh, that
friendly
immigrants, not
politicians.
billionaires.
And so it's also the message of like, a liberal government that will declare a climate emergency and the next day subsidize a pipeline for $5 billion because it will finance the green economy. So the standard of politics right now is we're going to kill you. This person is going to kill you quicker. We're going to kill you slower. And then Bianca and Eve and this campaign supported by thousands of people come around and saying, maybe we don't need to be killed by these billionaires, and maybe we need to take the levers of power away from them. And it just shocks me as someone who doesn't have kids that the people who want to bring kids into the world kind of spend so much time protecting those kids and trying to include them in the system that's like crumbling under their feet, and not actually saying that, like, hey, if we want to bring kids into this world, they need a stable climate and they need freedom from fascist oppression. And we actually have a function to make it happen, but we refuse. We refuse to see it because we're just trained into subservience, even in the movement. And that's why I'm so happy at your podcast and the possibility to say these things. And I would encourage you to reach out to the people who support the other campaigns and have them on and hear from them, because we all want the same thing. We
Well,
all want to.
Yuri,
yeah,
Yuri's face is like,
We all want to survive.
I would say the
We
following.
all want to live. We want to eat.
I'll say the following: open invites to any of the other candidates if they want to come on. And because Avi has been having a lot of huge grillings here, if he wants to respond to any criticism, him or the campaign or anybody else we've mentioned, they are more than welcome to email me, respond, and we will definitely post their comments in the pinned comment section. But I just want to say one thing before because we do have to wrap up because we're going over 2 hours now. Is no something which really just like bothers me about the left, the so-called this very imperfect left. It's just nobody really has the gut. Nobody has the courage of their convictions, the guts of their convictions, and that's what really pisses me off the most. Because you know, Julie, Julia Qassem, who I had on the show before, Lebanese American journalist, very great journalist, had her on the show to talk about Hezbollah and Lebanese affairs. She did an article in Al Mayadeen talking about the supposedly uncommitted folks, largely part of the Palestine solidarity movement. And she also was explaining that they were never really going to do a protest vote and vote for Jill Stein or the Party for Socialism and Liberation or just stay home. A lot of them actually just held their nose and voted for the Democrats. One thing which pissed me off about one element of the Palestine justice movement in Canada was they sent this list out to all the political parties with this questionnaire about Palestine, trying to see who's the best person on Palestine, and that's the person you should vote for, when it was ridiculous. I mean, come on. The Liberal Party and the Conservatives. Need I have to explain myself even more? And like the NDP, even as bad as the NDP is, was the only party though that even was trying to even pass like a bill that would have at least done like an arms embargo on Israel. And yet this group was just like, well, this liberal is kind of good on this one, so y'all should vote for him. This NDP is really good. And then went back to this stupid tactical voting nonsense. And then again, even and again, like even like the left who vote or they claim they vote NDP and support and support NDP, but I'm pretty sure a lot of those people who are hostile towards Yves and Bianca, I'm pretty sure when it comes to election time, do they actually vote for the for the NDP regardless of how bad the NDP is? No, I'm pretty sure they engage in stupid tactical voting. So nobody has the courage of their like convictions, and that is just mind baffling. And given what's going on right now in this world, I mean, it's like Palestine gets a lot of attention. It's not just Palestine, but if Palestine is the one issue which keeps you up at night, and Palestine should be a window into everybody's world of how rotten imperialism is, how settler colonialism is, everywhere and anywhere, and the fact that people still don't have the courage of their convictions to do a real protest vote, which is this left alternative, or fuck the Democrats and Republicans, fuck Labour and the Tories in England and Australia and New Zealand. No, it's still like this tactical voting and this lesser evilism nonsense. And you know that yeah that really just does my head in. But then the final question, then final question, then I have to ask this. This is gonna I'm kind of even afraid to ask this question, but here it goes. So, Yves Engler, barred from running, Bianca, barred from running. I don't know how the NDP Socialist Caucus is going to collectively decide who is going to be their second, third, and fourth choice, because I know in this leadership race, it's ranked choice voting, which is which is interesting in and of itself. But you two, you both are involved in in the Yves Engler and the Bianca campaign. So who are you guys going to? So who would be your first, second, and third choice, or no comment, or if you guys think no, like like forget the NDP, like I'm not like I don't even care like who like the members decide is going to vote. Yeah, Jasmine, very curious your response, followed by Zach.
Mhm. I I see many different strategies. The Yves Engler Bianca Mugyenyi campaign has decided not to give a strategy to our supporters. So everybody that signed up, we're not going to tell them, we're not giving them a ballot strategy. Um, and I
And,
think that's probably,
is that same then for like members of like the campaign? We don't have Julius or Barry to explain how the NDP Socialist Caucus is going to do it, but I think whoever will be the leader, they'll continuously say to people, "Let's fight and reform the NDP." But very curious how you guys are going to do it. So sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
Jess.
no, I don't know that yeah, I don't know exactly how Socialist Caucus is doing it, but of course, like Barry was a part of these conversations and yeah, so I guess like I haven't entirely decided. I think it will depend, I guess. I'm going to the convention at the end of March. That's where we're going to vote. So, I'm interested to see how that process goes. Interested to see how our campaign gets treated there, how I get treated there. I'm running to be NDP president.
Really? Woohoo!
I'm the Socialist Caucus pick for NDP president, just simply because you get 5 minutes at the mic. So let me hit them with a good speech. Um, but
I'll be rooting for you. Hope you do well.
yes, yeah, I know it's gonna be hilarious, but um I think like when I think about it for myself, like when my friends have asked me, I say I have a personal vendetta against Avi. Like what Zach was saying, like I wish I could be excited like you are. But I said, maybe for you the best choice is Avi. And like I say that to them. But I think for me, like I would put Tony because to me, like I don't think I would have anybody else
Tony
on the
McQuail.
ballot.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I would have anybody else on the ballot except for Tony because he's the only one who has made a statement on Bianca being disqualified and that's not democratic. So he's the only one that's actually acknowledged that this is a rigged election. And it's actually double the amount of rigged. I wish that he spoke out with Eve. But that's extremely important to me. It shows that Tony, when he speaks, I don't think he's necessarily made for politics, but he says all the right things. And, I know that he believes what he says. He has a coherent logic within him. And he doesn't even necessarily have a policy platform. Like he has these like four R's, but he doesn't have policies underneath them. They're like regeneration and or something like that. Like they're kind of just like these like words and like he wants to put forward a vision. But I respect that he felt like it was so important that even though he's not necessarily cut out for it, that he felt like this message needed to be put out there. I also supported Tanille's campaign at the beginning, and I signed her nomination form, and I've kind of kept up on it a little bit. And she has some good policies. I mean, she has one on tax havens that, if we were going to revise our platform, I would add something about tax havens, and her policy is pretty good. I actually feel like it goes like, I would maybe add a criminalizing aspect to our campaign that maybe criminalizes a lawyer if they help somebody evade taxes, which hers doesn't. But hers goes, it gets to the issue at hand. But how could she not speak out on Bianca being disqualified, especially like Tanille says in her speeches, it's so important for Indigenous people and people of color to see themselves running in positions of power. Bianca said the same thing, and there's no solidarity there. Like that's really disappointing for me. And then I simply cannot put Avi first. I think he's a fraud. I think I'm maybe a little bit farther on it just because I had that personal experience with him, which I'm just totally turned off from him. I also really don't like when people I don't feel like they're being authentic with me. And I don't feel he's an authentic person, and I'm just personally I'm very turned off by people like that. And then Heather, I mean, of course not. She's a liberal to me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, right now I would say Tony is probably the only one that I could put on my ballot. But I might just not vote. Yeah,
So,
it's a rigged
Zach,
election.
Zach, before you answer the question, I just want to say this to Jasmine. I was thinking what your answer was going to be, and somehow I thought it would be Tony first choice, Tanille second choice, and then like Avi third choice. So
Yeah.
interesting telekinetic that way. Zach,
Um, yeah.
it's just you.
Mhm.
Yves doesn't get a lot. They continue to bar Yves. They continue to bar Bianca. Who would be your first, second, and third choice?
Um, I approach my my journalism and my engagement from a decolonial and anarchist intellectual tradition.
Okay.
So I'm sort of touristing in electoral democracy right now. I don't think you can avoid it. So I'm more interested in the three names of the unnamed anonymous NDP vetting committee than I am in the five names that they have approved. Um, so it reminds me of the quote, I don't know who said it, but the people who are profiting and destroying our world have names and addresses. So before I even consider who I would theoretically mark an X next to the name of, I want the names of the three people who who do the bidding of mass murder, who want to kill Palestinian kids, who want to kill all the kids in the world by continuing to expand fossil fuels. That's what we're really talking about. We're really talking about mass murderers. We need their names. We need to put X's near their names. And we need to make sure that they are unemployable in anything related to the public sector and our movement. They should be serving fries, waiting tables, doing whatever they want in the public sector, but they have names and addresses, and these are the ones who are pulling the levers that foreclose on our future, and that's not acceptable to me. So I don't care about the names that are on offer from those people. I care about who they are and where they live and what they're doing to the people that are now and the people that are yet to come for the little ones. And you might want to call me radical, or you might want to call me, not worthy of being on the inside, but why the fuck is it radical to say that kids shouldn't be killed, that we shouldn't kill them in Palestine, and we shouldn't kill the kids that are born in 2026 who I would hope that they would be blessed with enough time on earth that they can see their own grandkids and that they can see forests and that they could eat clean food and breathe clean air and drink clean water. That's what this is about. And that's why this isn't radical. And that's why this is super sane. So they'll say that you're so insane, you're so unrealistic. No, stop killing kids. Stop killing kids through policy. And if you're the one protecting that policy, I want to know who you are, and I want to get you so far away from making decisions and impacting the future, um, that I'll leave it there, but I'll say that um, that these people have to be stopped, and we can't accept them. We can't accept their decisions. And all the candidates now that you're choosing now have accepted those decisions. Um, so I can't answer that question. The only way I can answer it is I want names.
Well, well, in fairness, in fairness to the five candidates, if anybody saw that, I don't even call it a debate. I would call it that discussion on Palestine that Canadians for Peace and Justice in the Middle East did. All of their answers were quite good. So just in defense of them, just have to add that as journalism objectivity. All righty. Well, I don't want to keep you guys. I've kept you guys for too long. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So before we go, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One with Jasmine Peardon, university student studying political science in Montreal, and we were also joined by Zach Ruiter. No, Ruiter or Rudier?
It's Ruter.
Ruiter.
It's
Ruiter.
actually
It's Dutch. It's a Dutch last name, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a really R.
My father's Dutch, so that's interesting. Zach Ruiter, indie journalist, documentary filmmaker, and news reporter and activist. Sorry, folks, we that Julius R. Scott of the NDP Socialist Caucus and Socialist Action Canada Workers Action Movement couldn't join us, as well as Bianca and Yves. But do want to say just the following. Uh, yes, of course, folks, don't forget to donate to One Plus One, and don't forget to share us widely. Sometimes Facebook blocks me, so it's very important that people share us widely. And also, just want to say the following. I was going to read this, but I'll just say this off the top of my head. Uh, you know, uh, as somebody who really admires both Yves and Bianca, it's been painful to look at the hostility, the smears. I think Zach said it best. In short, the marginalization of this wonderful, socialist at home, anti-imperialist abroad, and it's been really tough to see a lot of the hostility Yves has gotten, and it's been just quite blood boiling and infuriating to also see Bianca being rejected. I don't know if I would have been able to, with my sensitive mental health, I don't know if I would have been able to have withstand what Yves has been going through and what Bianca has been going through the past several months. But I'll say this. The NDP Socialist Caucus even recruiting him and standing by him says a lot about them and their politics in a very good way than it does about the people who have been hostile towards Yves. And and having been on some of the campaign meetings, I just have to say the following. I think both Yves and Bianca have been very lucky to have had a campaign team that's included you, Jasmine, you, Zach, Barry, Julius, all of the other wonderful people who who are part of the campaign, because I think if you don't have that, I don't know how anybody even recovers from the avalanche of just grotesque smears and marginalization that Yves has had to deal with and what Bianca has had to deal with. And going forward, anti-imperialism. I know it sounds cheap to say this because I know people are doing their best. We just have to step our game up. I guess we have to be even more aggressive in our anti-imperialism online and when we're talking to people. So so that being said, as as someone who would have loved to have been living in Canada and have joined this campaign, I think Yves and Bianca have both been very blessed to have had you guys as part of the campaign team. So thanks for fighting for fighting their corner. And that's all, folks. Good night and good luck. Join us next week. We are continuing our Africa series, but until then, good night and good luck. Jasmine, Zach, thank you so much for taking time on a Saturday late afternoon, early evening to come here. All my best to everyone.
Thank you.